broadcasting on YouTube as well. So, hey, YouTube, if you're watching an archive version, you might want to fast forward about 12 minutes to the top of the show. And yeah, let's have a good one. You can call in and have a chat with Robin, please, with your questions on, I don't know, what is it? 033-000-11264. And the number is on the screen right there and right there. Okay, cool. That's a good one. All right, lovely. Please share the show, people. Please share the show. Thank you. Thank you. Copyright free, Facebook. Yeah. That was Reckless. Olly Vore. Yeah, Olly Vore. Oh yeah. All right. Don't know what's going on there. I bet you couldn't tell the difference. Wow, lots of people. God bless you. Hello, everybody. Haven't you got anything better to do? Blimey. It occurs to me that hold on a sec. What's going on with that? Right. It occurs to me that there's a lot of people with some very good questions tonight that will be better than mine. I've no doubt, because I do not have a legal brain. For example, Amanda Thompson here says, Ollie asked Robin, what is it in the EU's part of the withdrawal that allowed May to go straight to them and bypass asking the government, etc., 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 etc. I know you've got loads of questions, and I want to try and be as efficient with the questions and comments as possible. So, and I don't really want to miss big questions. So look, do us a favor, folks. If you've got a question that really matters to you, then I would like to, I don't want to waste it. I don't want it to be wasted. So do me a favor, open up a text editor, Notepad or something, and paste your question. And then when, I don't know, I say go or something, or I don't know, whatever, I'll say, right, questions, and then paste them in into the comments. And then I won't put them in there anyway. Please put them in there anyway. But also, when you put them in there, copy them. And then when I say, right, okay, now we're going to go through some questions from folks, paste them, because that way they won't go to waste. And I want to get the best out of today's show as we possibly can. I'm sure you do. Mm. 4 minutes. Whoa. Oh, I better call my guest. A couple of minutes. Oh well.
Remember how you did it. If you still wanna kiss it, come and get it. Sweeter than a rice cake, cake breast sipping, kill it, tip it, fill it. Remember how you did it. Remember how you did it. If you still wanna kiss it, come and get it. Sweeter than a rice cake, breast sipping, kill it, tip it, fill it. Your candles, let me make a couple wishes. Now watch me get it. 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 Now watch me get it.
Hi, Robin. Lovely.
Hello.
Got your video, sir.
But I was going to get dance music there.
Well, you are getting dub music, sir. Yeah. Couple of minutes. Couple of minutes, people. Doodle-doo. Thank you for your video. I'll embed that. Hey folks! Good evening, good people. Welcome to the Daily Brexit. Holding democracy to account, fighting for self-determination and exposing Theresa May's deal for an EU treaty of servitude. I'm Olly Connelly. Thanks for turning up. And now, suing the GOV. So, RoboTez has extended Article 50 without an act of Parliament. Surprise, ruddy, surprise! How is this legal? Is it legal? Is she even legal? How on earth is this by-dictat Prime Moron remotely legal? Fortunately, solicitor Robin Tilbrook, chairman of the English Democrats Party, is more clued up on the legalese than me. And is suing this shyster government, citing the illegality of extending Article 50, and most seriously at a time when the political class is hell-bent on ditching democracy. Now this may be Brexit's last chance saloon, bar forcing sovereignty with some kind of sit-in or a general strike. Taking your calls on UK number, it's at the top of the spiel. On Discord, that's gov.ly/rant, and see you in the comments. Please help the show, support free speech, paypal.me/Brexit. Thank you. And please share the thing, like the page, all that. Thank you. Okay, all right, that's enough of that. Robin, good evening, sir. Just a quick roll call, please.
Good evening.
Good evening. Now, I've got your video there, but my screen, as usual, is all a bit skew-whiff. And let's see if I can pull... there we go. That's better. Lovely. Okay, we're looking good. Just want to just go through some of the news stories of the day, please, with you, Robin. I'd like your input on some of these things. And something, first of all, that is not directly Brexit related, but very, very important, it seems to me, from the point of view of freedom of speech, and indeed for shows such as this that take the fake stream media to account, hopefully. This is RT's take on what they call a dark day for internet freedom. EU lawmakers approve controversial copyright reform. This is Article 13, people. The European Parliament has voted to adopt the highly controversial Article 13 provision, which would govern the production and distribution of content online under the auspices of increasing copyright protections. Tuesday's move will update the EU's 20-year-old copyright rules and will govern audiovisual content, much to the dismay of many social media users who have already begun outpouring their grief online. And indeed, some of us have been for a few years now worried about this. However, the Parliament said in a statement that sharing memes and GIFs has been protected even more than it was before, and they will continue to be available and shareable on online platforms. It seems to me, Robin, that what they're trying to go for is people that are trying to expose them.
Yes, I mean, the thing about the European system generally for making laws is it's not very responsive, not only to democracy, but it's also not very responsive really to ordinary business. It's quite responsive to big business and its big budgets for lobbying, but it's not at all responsive to ordinary business. So usually we wind up getting the short end of the straw in terms of the way that it legislates, and it's just not a very good legislative system.
Very, very concerning. I imagine that there will be hopefully a lot of newsprint about that. Unfortunately, it's going to be from the snowflakes who are all worried that they can't share their cakes. When actually we need to be sharing the truth about the reality that is the EU tyranny. The Telegraph is leading on Boris warns of appreciable risk. Brexit could be cancelled, as DUP warns May delay is better than her prison deal. Well, Boris, that story is a story that is basically recycling from him. The DUP angle, it seems to me, is a more important story. The DUP are saying that they continue not to be bribed by this Prime Minister, Robin. Any surprise there?
No, I think the DUP have been consistent throughout, and a year or more ago when I did an interview about the Northern Ireland issue, I thought that would be the case. I think one of the more worrying things that's come out over the last 24 hours is that Rees-Mogg and his European Research Group are starting to get very wobbly.
That's right.
And looking like they might actually do a deal with May and let her wretched withdrawal treaty become law.
That's right. Let me just quickly read that story on your screen now. Brexit, Jacob Rees-Mogg accused after signalling support for Theresa May's deal. This is the Times. PM humiliated by Tory rebellion as cabinet prepares for snap election, they're saying. Jacob Rees-Mogg was accused of going soft by hard Brexiteers after he indicated that he was likely to vote for Theresa May's deal to leave the European Union. The Prime Minister will address members of the 1922 Committee of Backbenchers tomorrow, stoking rumours that she could be preparing a significant announcement, possibly connected with her departure. Today, Mr. Rees-Mogg, leader of the ERG, the European Research Group, signalled his willingness to back down after Parliament seized control of Brexit last night, with 3 government ministers having quit to give MPs the power to tear up Mrs. May's deal. There is so much there. We could do several shows just on those 3 paragraphs, Robin. But yes, indeed. I mean, this is worrying. But Jacob Rees-Mogg has been showing signs of swaying. What is your take on this?
I haven't met Jacob Rees-Mogg, so I can't really sort of comment on him as a person. But it does seem to me that he's perhaps not as resolved and resolute a character as he's been trying to make out over the last few years. And certainly we've got to a crunch point now when we actually need people like him to be resolved and to basically block the government from getting its deal through before we're out of the EU. If that's allowed to slip through at the last minute, we could be in serious trouble.
There's talk in this piece also about possible discussion about announcement about Theresa May's departure. Given,
she's going to dangle that, isn't she? I mean, it's not particularly strange that there's talk about that. Although I do think there's one possible angle that I haven't seen covered much in the papers. The fact is, she has now qualified for a full prime ministerial pension. She's done 2.5 years, so she wouldn't get any more money by staying on any longer.
Oh, that is an interesting angle. Absolutely. Would we be? What's your take on whether we'd be better off without her or with her? I'm in two minds about it now. In a way, we'd be better off actually if she stayed.
I don't. To be honest, I don't think it matters. One of the things I thought was quite interesting when she got selected, or what we want to call it, a sort of coronation as Prime Minister. One of the things that I thought was quite interesting was that she was so obviously not somebody who was really a leader, and yet the Conservative Party has such a dearth of leaders that she wound up being the leader. It does show what a sort of lack of talent, in a way, that they've got at the top. That somebody like Theresa May, who is perhaps a bit unkind to say that you might think twice about putting in charge of a checkout counter. She's nevertheless wound up being supposedly the leader of the whole country.
Aye. And don't we know it? I did wonder, actually, when the ERG prompted that confidence vote from the Conservative MPs, if that was a sign of their actually somehow being part of this pantomime which was leading us to this brino. To me, it just seemed the wrong time. As much as I wanted to see her go, the fact is that it didn't happen. The numbers weren't there. That was a mistake, wasn't it?
It was most definitely a mistake. However, there was a rumour at the time, which I think may well be true, was that Mrs. May actually got some of her supporters to put letters in to trigger the contest at a time when she felt confident she could win it. And you bear in mind that at that point she hadn't made her 2.5 years, and so wouldn't have got a full prime ministerial pension, going back to my previous point. But now she perhaps doesn't have any personal interest in in carrying on anymore, apart from obviously continuing with the lifestyle of having the townhouse and the country house, and generally being treated as somebody who's far more important than she could possibly have otherwise hoped to be.
Absolutely. Just another couple of stories in brief. Breitbart is reporting their top story: polls. Most Britons think Parliament determined to stop Brexit. Remainer petition irrelevant. A poll by Comres has revealed that a majority of voters believe Parliament is trying to stop the UK leaving the EU. The results coming after the Remain-dominated House of Commons succeeded in a power grab to take control of the Brexit process from the government. In findings published by The Telegraph Monday night, 55% believe Parliament is determined to block Brexit. That figure including 38% of Remain voters and 87% of Leavers. Fewer than 1 in 5 disagree. How can this Parliament, Robin, be so brazen in dismantling democracy?
Yes, well, I think one of the interesting discussions that I've seen coming out in some of the comments about Brexit is that there are two ways really of thinking about democracy. One is popular democracy, where we think, as I do, that the popular will is what should be being implemented by our politics. And obviously that's the people that subscribe to that point of view are saying, we voted for this, it's the will of the people, it should be implemented. Against them are people who are describing themselves as Liberal Democrats, although they're not part of the Liberal Democrats Party, of course, but they're Liberal Democratic. And although liberal democracy has this sort of veneer of democracy about it, in as much as there are elections, the point of liberal democracy is to ensure that the majority never actually get their will on anything. And there was a really good article explaining or confessing how this worked a little while back, probably 2 months or so, in The Spectator, which I did reproduce it on my blog, where Matthew Parris, the Times commentator and previously Conservative MP,
yes,
was saying that throughout his career as a Conservative MP, he had quite deliberately and consciously adopted an approach where he was basically saying that he supported things that he thought were popular and would get him elected, but that he actually had absolutely no intention whatsoever of allowing these things to become law. So an example he gives in his article is the death penalty. When he was standing as a Conservative MP, it was absolutely the received wisdom that the majority of people wanted the reintroduction of the death penalty. And it was a regular sort of thing in Conservative Party conferences that people from the floor would call for the reintroduction of the death penalty. And people like Matthew Parris were basically making out that they were in favour of the death penalty. But as he puts it in his article, what he did was he always voted in principle for the death penalty, but always found details that he would vote against in order to block it, because he said it was wrong and he wasn't going to do it. And whatever you think of the rights and wrongs of the death penalty, the fundamental point here is that he set out to defeat the will of the people as he thought it, because he didn't believe in it, because he's a liberal Democrat rather than a popular Democrat. And I think that's quite an interesting distinction that's sort of come out of the whole Brexit discussion. And obviously a lot of the people in Parliament are, this liberal democratic approach where they are trying to block popular will because they don't agree with it, and they don't care that they're against the majority, because that's the way they've always been on issues.
It was Tony Blair, I think, was it not, that downgraded the maximum penalty for treason from the death penalty to, what would it be now, life imprisonment?
It is life imprisonment, which obviously doesn't actually mean that you spend your life in prison. It means that you're sentenced, and then the judge will give a recommendation as to how long you spend in prison before you're released on parole.
Very convenient for a war criminal to have done that, it seems to me.
Having said that, I'm not sure that even as a war criminal he'd get convicted of under our treason laws, which at the moment have, for instance, as one of the capital, or one of the treasonable acts is to seduce the Prince of Wales's wife.
Really?
Yes.
Would you call what you're seeing at the moment treason?
Well, certainly from a legal point of view, the answer is it isn't treason, because it's not an attack on the Queen and her family, and her right to be Queen. It's not the ancient idea of the treason law. But what it is a sort of internationalist or globalist gang of elitist Remainers who are against the idea of popular sovereignty, against the idea of the nation state, against the idea of the nation, these people are an enemy to anybody that really feels strongly about being patriotic or about their nation or about the nation state. These people want the nation state dissolved. I don't know if you've seen, but some of the more extreme remarks that you see about this get reported from America. And so, for instance, there's been Democrats who've literally been saying that it's not so much that they oppose Trump's wall between the United States and Mexico, but they oppose all borders, and they do so because all borders, they say, are racist.
Well, surely the natural conclusion of that would be that all treaties are, all trade agreements are racist as well, because they're effectively walls.
Yes. Well, I think you're right there. I'd go along with you on it. I mean, I suspect they might if they were being logical, but you've got to bear in mind that when people start talking about racism, for example, they're not actually talking about race. The whole left-wing thing about talking about race is that it's intended to be about power, and they are basically seeking to undermine the status quo because it's a whole sort of Marxist-style agenda, isn't it? And they're trying to bring on the revolution.
And I guess that leads us on to the UN Migration Compact, actually, as well, which was barely reported, at least until it was signed by Theresa May. I saw no mainstream media news stories about it whatsoever. And as I understand it, Theresa May, she went off to Marrakesh and she signed this agreement, a UN agreement with, 70 or 80 other countries around the world who all agreed that they would no longer have borders, effectively, and that anybody could travel from any part of the world to any other part of the world. Robin, am I correct in that? Is that a correct analysis?
I can't vouch for the exact details of the agreement. I haven't looked through it carefully, so I wouldn't like to say exactly what it means. But certainly, what I've been reading about it would agree with the sort of thing that you've been saying there. I also think that it's actually more typical of Theresa May and her real attitude to politics than people generally understand. I think it's worth remembering or explaining that. In fact, she was the person who was the driving force behind the Cameron government adopting gay marriage as a policy. It wasn't Cameron. Cameron simply went along with it. It was Theresa May who pushed it.
Right.
And she also, when Harriet Harman, then Home Secretary under the Labour government, introduced the Equalities Act, in which Harriet Harman was saying that this was socialism in a single act. When that was introduced, and Theresa May was the shadow Home Secretary, responding to Harriet Harman laying this bill before Parliament, Theresa May stood up and she said that the Conservatives welcomed the act, and their sole regret was that it didn't go far enough. So Theresa May has history and form on the kind of thing that we're talking about here, of not being actually patriotic, not being somebody who is really, in any meaningful sense, conservative, and somebody who is actually a multiculturalist, internationalist or globalist.
That's right. She doesn't have the nickname Sharia May for nothing, does she? I think under her stewardship as the longest-serving Home Secretary, there were dozens of Sharia courts sprung up around the country, as I understand it, that have been admitted, or certainly there have been one or two ex-coppers that have come on this show, and they've said such anyway. I was under the impression that it was the first duty of government to protect the people. Am I just being romantic?
think you are a bit there, Ollie. I don't think our current crop of leaders have particularly any interest in that. They want to manage our situation so that people don't actually burst out into protests that might destabilise their position, as you've seen in France at the moment. They don't want that to happen. But that's not to say they're actually interested in looking after our real interests. Then I don't think they are.
They've become more tyrannical towards their own people, haven't they? Whether it's France or here or Sweden, apparently they want to grant asylum to.
They do. I've got an idea for you because in the 19th century, people used to say that Tsarist Russia was an absolute autocracy. Moderated by assassination, because every now and again an autocratic czar got assassinated.
Yeah.
The movement in our country and across much of Europe, or that part of Europe which is subjected to the EU, at any rate, is a movement towards autocracy, towards authoritarianism, towards banning things. Rather as we were talking about earlier with the internet. It's a move towards control and clamping down on what people actually want. It is, however, moderated, particularly in our government's context, by incompetence. The level of competence of any part of the state is just amazingly low, really. If you whenever you deal with the state, you're dealing with people who don't really know what they're doing, and there's endless delay. They're just not really doing a good job, and it's not surprising because people are no longer picked by the state for because they're going to be good at the job. They're picked because they're going to tick box some multiculturalist representative function, rather than because they're wanting to do the job.
When you look at these characters on the front bench and the shadow bench, I mean, truth, they seem like such a bunch of numpties to me. Some of them just incredible, just really ridiculously. I don't know how on earth they're in those positions. But at the very, very top, I would say that these people are extremely bright. The Theresa Mays. I wonder, is it incompetence? Or is it malfeasance?
It is with Theresa May's behaviour over Brexit. There's been a sort of consistent, is it incompetence or is it duplicity? Mm-hmm. The answer is probably it's a bit of both, isn't it? It's probably partly incompetence and partly duplicity. I mean, if you consider her negotiating approach with the EU, pretty much any provincial solicitor that I come across would do a far better job than she's done. But then, and maybe she did it that way because she didn't want to succeed. But then you look at her negotiation with the DUP after she'd done so badly in the election that she called after having told us time and again she wasn't going to call it.
That's right. And some of that ridiculous. She had to do a U-turn immediately when she basically insulted everybody over the age of 65, for example. Sorry, please carry on.
But after the election, when she does so badly about it, she actually needed the DUP. So she and her team entered into talks with the DUP, and the DUP said that they were perfectly willing to get involved in an arrangement to support her government on some conditions. At which point, without waiting to get anything signed off, she went off and told the Queen and publicised that she'd done a deal. And of course, the DUP are very canny types. And the moment that she'd done that, she'd lost all her negotiating position, and they basically got everything out of her that they could possibly get out of her. And that includes £1.5 billion a year off the English taxpayer to help subsidise still further the position in Northern Ireland.
Okay, just corresponding to that, according to Guido Fawkes, Theresa May's government now has 15 unfilled positions. I think they lost another 3 ministers last night, didn't they? Guido has always been a big believer in small government, they say, although he never thought Theresa May would be the Prime Minister on the verge of taking it too far. There are now a whopping 15 political vacancies in May's government after the latest bout of resignations last night. 4 fully fledged ministerial posts are now empty. Sarah Newton has still not been replaced since she resigned as Minister for Disabled People 13 days ago. Now May also needs to find a new Foreign Minister, Health Minister, and Business Minister. Wow, I tell you, she's doing well, isn't she? It's just incredible.
Could I come back on that?
Please
because
do.
One of the things that's been going on with government over, at least since Blair, is that the number of ministerial positions has been increasing. And of course, when you've got the Conservatives haven't got a full majority in the House of Commons, the result is that actually nearly half of all Conservative MPs are in some sense in the government. And of course, that means that they're supposed to vote for the government. It's a way of maintaining
it? It says time's up for the Prime Minister. Do you agree?
Robin.
Yeah, I do.
I apologise. Please carry on.
Sorry. So all I was just saying,
they're
is that
supposed
actually,
to be voting
if you look
with the
historically,
government.
there's more ministers than there used to be, and so I very much doubt it will affect the running of real government. Whether how many ministers she's got resigned. In fact, I rather think that you might wind up with real government working rather better. I mean, I thought it was, just as an aside, I thought it was quite interesting that the Belgians wound up having no government at all for over a year.
Yes.
And it made absolutely no difference to the way that the state ran.
Same deal in Spain, huh? And actually the economy improved.
Yeah.
Okay. The coming into what we were looking to talk about tonight, the Express, their lead story actually, Brexit Live, get us out now. May's Brexit delay unlawful. MPs issue shock legal block. Theresa May will address Tory MPs at the 1922 committee at 5 p.m. tomorrow. Amid speculation, she will use the meeting to announce the date of her resignation, while Brexiteer MPs have claimed the decision to delay Article 50 was unlawful. One MP said it was certainly a possibility the Prime Minister would inform the influential group of backbenchers when she intends to step down. Meanwhile, Brexiteer MPs, led by, God bless him, Sir Bill Cash, have written to Mrs May warning of their serious legal objections to her decision to delay Article 50 and hence Brexit beyond March the 29th. Robin, this is your argument, is it not? How does this work? What has happened? What has happened that in your opinion is illegal?
Okay. Could I say first of all, in terms of Bill Cash's approach, I don't think what he's doing is at all helpful.
Mm-hmm. Go on.
And you mentioned the idea of a pantomime earlier.
Yeah.
Basically, we're in a situation now where the government has almost certainly behaved in a way that's illegal about this, and they look like they're intending to carry that through until after Friday. And of course, if they do carry that through until after Friday, we may be out when they're still trying to make out that we're in, and we may be able to get the High Court to declare that we're actually out.
Yes.
So what Bill Cash has done is he has basically highlighted to Theresa May the risk that the government may actually take us out of the EU without meaning to. In other words, he's made it more likely that the government will actually do something to block that.
He's given them a hint.
Well, it's more than a hint. It was done very forcefully in the House of Commons when he was grandstanding about it.
Yes.
And if you're thinking that he's somebody who's actually trying to get us out, then why on earth would he be telling them that actually there was a risk that we were going to get out despite what they wanted to do, and give them the warning that they should actually, or could actually, correct their mistake now within the next couple of days? So I don't think that his approach is at all helpful, and I worry that he may actually have got enough of the government's attention that they'll do something about it now. Because the thing is, they haven't got an Act of Parliament justifying carrying on after the 29th. And in fact, the only relevant Act of Parliament about the notice under and using Article 50 is the EU Withdrawal Act 2017. Unfortunately, the legal sort of rules that we need to talk about here are confusingly labelled because there's an EU Withdrawal Act 2017, there's an EU Withdrawal Act 2018. The 2017 Act is a very short act, and all it provides for basically is to give Theresa May, in particular, the Prime Minister, power to serve the Article 50 notice. There are no further powers mentioned in that act, and the impact of the Gina Miller case, which was the reason why the government did that act, is that once Parliament has actually legislated, in other words, the full Act of Parliament on an area, there is no remaining power to ministers to do anything in that area apart from with a new Act of Parliament. So what that means is that when Theresa May wrote to Donald Tusk the other day asking for an extension, and when she agreed an extension, both of those were undoubtedly illegal. And therefore I would argue that actually any agreement that arises out of that is actually illegal and beyond her power to agree. It's ultra vires, to use the legalistic Latin, beyond the powers. Therefore her agreement is actually void. There is no, as I said earlier, there is no statutory right to carry on beyond the 29th. We're out on the 29th, apart from one possible provision which is now being talked about, because under the second EU Withdrawal Act, the EU Withdrawal Act 2018, there was written into that a power for ministers by regulation to change the exit date, as it puts in the Act. But if you actually look at that Act isn't about defining when we come out. It's about saying when the changeover occurs to the new laws which have been implemented, as a result of membership of the EU. In other words, it's an act to carry on with the same rules as we had before. And so, if you look carefully at what's meant by exit date in that act, it's not talking about the day we come out of the EU. It's talking about the implementation of the system that the Act is setting out, and therefore has no bearing on whether we're actually in or out of the EU. What has a bearing on that is the fact that there is no legislation other than the legislation authorising Theresa May to serve the 2-year notice. So I think as we stand at the moment, and even if this statutory instrument is passed and it has to be passed by both House of Commons and the House of Lords, I still think that we will still be out on the 29th unless they pass a full Act of Parliament changing that.
So what's actually going on here is a grand subterfuge from pretty much the entire British establishment and the EU, assisted by a complicit media, the BBC and the whole lot of them, who are pretending that we can extend Article 50. In your opinion, that this is what they're doing, as opposed to the reality that no, there's no Act of Parliament.
Exactly. The BBC and all the various mainstream media people who are commenting on this are, the way you see news now is, of course, you get a little snippet of something that's news, And then what they do is they cut somebody who's one of their staffers who's going to give the BBC's opinion on something. And most of the so-called news is actually the BBC giving us their opinion. And the same is true of the other channels. And if you look at the newspapers, very often they're not really telling you much in the way of news. It's mostly opinion pieces, and it's opinion pieces from a certain angle. Really, it's not from right across the spectrum.
I totally agree.
I do think that feeds into the poor leadership that we now have with our way of the politics is with the establishment, because a lot of politics decisions are being based upon what the media is saying about something, rather than what's actually going on. And very often the politician is basically trying to answer a media storm about something or other, rather than really dealing with genuine issues. And it does lead into a lot of errors being made. And that comes back to my sort of theory about authoritarian impulse, but moderated by incompetence.
Wow. I have to say, I feel sick to the pit of my stomach over this. I know a lot of people do. I imagine that you have yourself, sir, here and there. To me, it's quite incredible that our country is just being sold out like this. That an entire people, a great people, is being sold out like this. That a culture is being potentially eradicated. What with, for example, the Coudenhove-Kalergi type plan and what have you. That, for example, Juncker supports and has said that he is a great big fan of. I just find it absolutely amazing. But it does seem that the law is being replaced by some form of magic.
Yes, I think it's probably worth bearing in mind that part of the reason why Britain didn't fit in very well, and England in particular didn't fit very well into the EU system, was because of the common law. And our law, the philosophy of our law, is very different from continental law. In Western Europe, almost all continental law is derived in one way or another from Roman law. And if it's not directly derived, so for instance, German law was is quite directly derived in many ways from Roman law. French law is indirectly derived through the Code Napoleon, but basically the concepts and many of the structures and ways that law is dealt with are Roman in origin, but they're a certain type of Roman. They're not the Republican Roman. They are late imperial Roman, and in particular from the Emperor Justinian. And Justinian is held out as this great sort of last flowering of the Roman Empire, but he was by modern standards he was a tyrant, and so much so that when a Roman senator, who I suppose anybody brought up with any sort of classical education would think of the senator as going to be this sort of grand person treated with respect, the conscript fathers of Republican Rome. No, when a senator came in the presence of Justinian, the senator was required to immediately lie face down with his arms outstretched, face down in the mud, as it were, on the ground, in the presence of the emperor. And that's the way in which the great and the good, as it were, within the Roman Empire were treated by emperors in those days. So that legacy is a legacy really of tyrannical law, and I think one of the doctrines of late Roman law that's worth quoting is that the supreme law is that the emperor's will is law. That's a Roman law doctrine, and that comes into the foundations of the legal systems of most continental countries. Whereas, by comparison, the English tradition of law is based on the common law and Magna Carta, and the common law is based on the idea of the sort of ancient rights of our people, and the idea then is that statute is only limiting some of our ancient rights, so that basically everything is permitted that isn't expressly restricted. Whereas with Roman law, the idea is that the state gives people their rights, and they can only do things that the state tells them they can do. And also, the state is not as subject to law as is the case with the Roman law thing in England, because of Magna Carta, where the king becomes subject to law. So we have a different philosophy about what the position of the state should be.
What about the Bill of Rights? Does that not protect us?
The Bill of Rights doesn't really protect us terribly well. Basically, the British Constitution is fundamentally based on English constitutional practice. The Bill of Rights is a provision in the Glorious Revolution in 1689, where Parliament, without having a king who's at that point legally legitimate, James II having fled and thrown the great seal of the Kingdom of England into the Thames as he went.
Right.
And the Parliament then met, but not as officially as a Parliament, but as a sort of constitutional convention, and they came up with proposals which they wanted William and Mary to agree as part of Parliament then offering them the crown.
Yes.
And there was a bit of a negotiation about what would be allowed. So, for instance, they originally wanted just Mary, who was a Stuart, to accept the crown, but William said he wasn't prepared to tolerate that. He'd got to be king as well, and after all, he'd arrived at Torquay with about 10,000 Dutch soldiers.
Yep.
He wasn't the person to be argued with at that point, so that's why we've got William and Mary as king and queen. But there were then provisions about things that could be inalienable rights, I suppose, as in the language of the American Constitution. But I'll give you for instance. One is the right of all adult male Protestants to bear arms. That's one of our rights in the Bill of Rights. But of course, that isn't the law of the land now.
No, it isn't. And yes. Okay. Let's take a few questions. We had one or two questions sent to me before the show, actually, as well. Roger Arthur, who I was having a dialogue earlier, who's a big fan of yours, Robin, says, "You're an experienced lawyer, knows the position very well. I would like to ask him the question below, but he couldn't make it himself this evening. I actually asked him if he'd like to have a repartee with you on the show, and I just sit back and listen. But he couldn't make it. But he said, I understand that the 2018 Withdrawal Act makes provision for a minor extension in the withdrawal date. How long can Theresa May exploit that provision? For how long can Theresa May exploit that provision? Of course, the EU can do nothing to repeal or amend the 2018 Withdrawal Agreement, and so far, no one in Parliament seems to have proposed that. What would you say to that?
So this is what I was talking about earlier, about what effect that statutory instrument has. And basically, a statutory instrument is an order, as it were, by a minister, based on a statutory power set out in an act. And the EU Withdrawal Act 2018 has in it a provision to allow ministers by regulation, and a regulation is an order that's then subject to affirmative approval by the House of Commons and the House of Lords. The 2018 Act has this provision that the Minister can, by regulation, change or redefine the exit date. But that is what is meant by exit date in that Act. It's not a general provision about the way the law applies. I mean, I'll give you for instance, about how sort of sealed and compartmentalized law is now with acts. If you were, say, a consultant, management consultant going into a business, you're probably working on a self-employed basis. So for tax and for certain employment rights, you would be not an employee. If you got injured when you're on the site, you would be an employee within the meaning of the health and safety legislation. If you got discriminated against within the meaning of the Equality Act, then you would be an employee for discrimination claims. So law doesn't, or statute law at any rate, doesn't provide for definitions which you can transfer across from one act to another. And that's where they've got themselves into a problem, because they've called this power the power to redefine exit date, without going on to think what does exit date mean in this piece of legislation. And if you look at it, what it actually means is the implementation of their transitional arrangements. It doesn't mean the actual day we leave. I'm afraid it's complicated, but I hope that's.
It is to me, to be honest with you. But that, Robin, is your ammunition.
It is, and obviously what we're hoping for is that the Bill Cash doesn't wake them up, and they don't do what they would need to do to change the law. And so, come 11:01 on the 29th, on Friday the 29th, we are actually out. And so, I mean, I'm sort of, if you'll pardon the expression, they've been talking all this time about it being a cliff edge, and I'm rather hoping we might be able to nudge them over it once we actually get there.
Are you not in danger of assisting what you accuse Bill Cash of doing in that case, of tipping them off?
Well, the law, procedural law, requires a solicitor who's bringing a case, or a party that's bringing a case, to set out their case and to invite, in this case, the government, but I mean, let's say if you were doing it against a local authority, it'd be the same, to invite them to consider your legal arguments. And anybody that's looked at my blog will see that I have set out there what I've done in the way of correspondence so far. And the reason why I've done it and openly explained the kind of arguments that I've just been explaining just now is because that's necessary in order to bring judicial review proceedings. Because what I'm thinking is that if the government carries on in the way that it's currently talking about carrying on, after Friday, we'll be able to make an application to the High Court for a declaration that we are out of the EU. And I think there's a very good chance that we will get that if the government doesn't change its course between now and then.
I asked you this question last week, but it still seems to me very relevant. Is there not a problem that we have a corrupt judicial system?
Well, we'll be in the High Court, and the High Court judges are the best of our crop of the judiciary. I think people who regularly appear in the High Court generally feel that judges are still making decisions according to law in the main. The area where they tend to be more influenced by leftist values is on procedures and things like that. And but what we've got here is a situation where the key body of common law decisions about what the Constitution says has only recently been set out in very great detail and comprehensively in the Gina Miller case. Mm-hmm. It's not a situation where there's much leeway for coming up with a different interpretation. It's there, it's gone through the system, it is embedded in the whole basis.
Oh, hold on. Sorry, Robin, please excuse me. So, now somebody's called in. Just caller, can you hear me, caller?
Hold on. Sorry, Robin.
Can you hear me, caller?
Yeah, hello. Is this Olly?
It is. Can you just bear with me, please, 1 second? And please mute
yes, it's Amanda.
Amanda Rolfson. Look, Amanda, please mute your microphone. Bit of chaos. Amanda, could you please mute your microphone just for a second so that we can hear the end of Robin's answer to that question, and then I'll bring you in. And oh, blimey. I don't know how to mute your mic, actually. There we go. Okay. Sorry, Robin, please carry on.
Who's it, man?
Oh, dear. I don't want to cut her off. I want to encourage callers, not...
Call me back.
Amanda?
Yeah.
Can you do me a favour and please mute your microphone just for a second whilst we hear the end of what Robin had to say there. And when he finishes, please chip in. Is that all right?
How's that?
All right, lovely. Go on, Robin, please. You were saying.
What was I saying, Ollie?
Oh God, I don't know now. Okay, all right, that's the way it goes. Amanda, what would you like to say? Amanda Rolfson, God bless you. What would you like to say?
Well, it may have been mentioned a little bit earlier, but I was rather late getting on. Am I wrong in thinking that the EU establishment cannot overrule our government when it comes to the Brexit? Because in our law, it has been written into law for us to leave on the 29th, but the EU have gone ahead and altered that date to the 12th of April, provided if there is no deal within the government. Now, I find this rather confusing, and I want somebody to correct me or put me in the correct picture in light as such.
Robin.
Yes. So, firstly, the EU, I suppose, can overrule the government, but it can only do so in accordance with our laws. And obviously, one of the main ways in which governments have been overruled by the EU is based upon the European Communities Act of 1972, which basically puts EU law as being superior to our law. But then the EU treaty comes along, the Lisbon Treaty, and then that's also put into our law. And of course, what the government's done is it served the notice under Article 50 in accordance with our law as a result of the Gina Miller case. And if you look at Article 50, what it says is that the notice has to be served in accordance with our law, and also that it's for 2 years. Unless there's a further request and agreement. And that's where the government's got itself into a bit of a problem, because the government didn't get the authorization of another statute to allow it to ask for more time. And it also didn't get the authorization of another statute to give it the right to agree to more time. So, for those reasons, I think the agreement for the request for an extension and the agreement for an extension are both illegal.
Yeah. Well, you see, that's my belief as well. I've been reading on the in and out of the Lisbon Treaty for the last 4 years. But it is so confusing. But I also found this section, and I've posted it on for Olly to read, where it states, not from the Lisbon Treaty, but from like the laws and our laws, the common laws, and different types of laws that we have in England. It says, as the Parliament is sovereign, it can make, unmake, and amend any law it wishes. In the sense that it is above the law, and the Queen is the head of the legal system and is not properly subject to the law, and that was stated on the 2nd of April only last year, 2nd of February of last year.
Yes, I mean, you've got to bear in mind that the meaning of the word Parliament isn't the House of Commons.
It's equivalent of the House of Commons as well as the House of Lords, isn't it?
Yes, but the Parliament, in the way that it can overrule things, does it by statute. It doesn't do it by resolutions. So it's what we're talking about when we're talking about Parliament is the Commons and Lords and the Sovereign or Queen in Parliament.
Yes.
That is the body that is, so far as law is concerned, the Sovereign. It's not the Queen or the House of Lords or the House of Commons on their own. Passing acts of Parliament. And it's true that one act of Parliament can reverse another act of Parliament. That does happen.
Amanda.
Yeah.
Could you please mute your microphone when you're not talking? Because I'll tell you got lovely dogs. I love your dogs. I'd love to give them a cuddle, but we don't want them on the show.
I've put my hand over the microphone on my phone.
Okay, Robin, please speak up. You've got to be louder than the dogs, Robin.
I'm not louder than the dogs. Oh dear.
No, the microphone on the computer is muted, and I put my hand over the microphone on the phone so you wouldn't hear them, but it didn't work.
Amanda, have you got any other questions? Because I'm gonna cut you off and take a few more questions. So what else would you like to ask?
No, not really. It was just the case of this, and knowing also that the Queen had given her assent to all these rules and regulations and things we did towards the. I've gone blank now.
The Queen's assent.
For the Article 50 to go through.
So the Queen's assent is part of the legislative process. So for there to be an act of Parliament, it needs to go through the process in the House of Commons and in the House of Lords and receive royal assent. However, the Queen doesn't personally sign off on acts. It's just part of the parliamentary procedure that there's a bit of flummery about. In Norman French, reign of and then they seal the law. But it has the key point is it has to go through both House of Commons and House of Lords, and be the same document has to be agreed in that process. And if there's a bit of disagreement, then you get the parliamentary tennis where the bill goes back and forth between the House of Lords and the House of Commons. And unless there's more or less unanimous support for an act, it generally takes quite a while to go through. And of course that's a key thing, bearing in mind that at the moment we're set to leave on Friday. So provided people spend enough time arguing and talking about it, and arguing and talking about other things, then there's a good chance that they would miss any deadline to pass any new legislation.
Robin, thank you. I cut Amanda off, bless her, because of the dogs, and I want you to be heard. But Amanda, I do hope that was useful. I think it was. Now, Christopher Michael Baxter asks, why has this suggestion of repealing the 1711 Communities Act not been forwarded to each and every MP? What would you say to that?
What date?
The 1711 Communities Act. He's talking about. It's not the ECA, is it?
I don't know any.
No, I don't know. That's I don't understand.
He talk about that, but it might be that what he means is the European Communities Act, which was 1972.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And there is a provision in the EU Withdrawal Act 2018 to repeal the European Communities Act 1972.
Yes, which, for example, is what Gerard Batten says we should have done. He said that's all that they should have done the day after the referendum. But please, carry on.
Well, they could have done that. Having said that, that wouldn't have been in accordance with our treaty obligations, and it wouldn't have been obviously in accordance with the Treaty of the Lisbon Treaty.
Yes, and
in particular, it wouldn't have been in accordance with Article 50. Some people have been saying that what we could have done is just said, right, we're out, and then if there's any argument about it, go to the Vienna Convention.
Yes,
I think the trouble with that is that would have left business in particular in even more of a state of uncertainty than what the process we've actually gone through.
Yeah, sure.
And you've got the British state at that point saying it's not going to honour obligations which it entered into, and obviously that's something that states sometimes do, but they're generally known as banana republics.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We have run on a little bit. Robin, I was wondering, could we possibly have you for another 20-25 minutes to discuss this? Because I know there's a load of folks with comments, and I just wonder if... Thank you. One thing that somebody earlier was saying to me, that they thought that Article 50 pertained only to financial matters. What would you say to that? No.
If you read Article 50, it is about it provides for a right and a mechanism for one of the member states to withdraw from the European Union, and that's what it's about. Obviously, the negotiations, which I think maybe what your caller was referring to, the negotiations for a trade deal should deal with the type of things that you're talking about. However, I personally, I think that the EU was never going to negotiate with us properly in terms of a trade deal. We were never going to get anything that was particularly good for us in the way of a trade deal, because if you think about it, any trade deal would have to be unanimously ratified by all the member states. So we were always going to get a problem with with Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland over borders and other issues. We were always going to get a problem with Spain over Gibraltar. We were always going to get a problem with France and fishing rights, and basically all of those various countries and areas within the EU would be saying that basically we couldn't agree any trade deal unless we satisfied whatever it was that they wanted. And you saw this rather clearly in the negotiations with Canada, because it turned out that Wallonia in the sort of coal mining area in Belgium blocked the Canadian deal for years, because they thought that it might impact on some of their interests. It wasn't even one of the member states. It was just one of the regions within Belgium blocked the Canadian deal for years. So you can imagine if, and it was over a minor issue, so minor that I'm afraid I can't even remember what it was now. But they thought it was against their interests for perhaps cheap Canadian coal to come in and be reducing the price of Wallonian coal, and the fact that a region within the EU could block such a deal, I think demonstrates the difficulty of getting a good deal for
That's
UK
right.
out of the EU bloc.
That's right. Were you talking about, sorry, TTIP? Or no, the Canadian trade agreement.
Canadian.
Yes, quite right. I remember that. Robin Horsley, who's on tomorrow. Hey, Robin. Popping in tomorrow. He asked, the comment's gone, but he said, let's say that the High Court agrees with you. Would the government be able to appeal to the ECJ?
Not to the ECJ, I don't think. But they would be able to appeal to the Court of Appeal and then the Supreme Court. Possibly. I mean, I don't know whether they'd get as far as the Supreme Court when there has been so recent a decision under the Miller case. Because the way that the court system works with appeals now is that nobody has an automatic right to appeal. What happens is after you've got a decision that you don't like, you then have to ask the judge for permission to appeal. And if you don't get permission from the judge, you then have to go to the court above and ask them for permission. And once you had 2 refusals, you can't go any further.
If anybody in the comments, please, would care to put a link to both Robin's blog and also, not you, Robin, because I want your head thinking for us, please. And also for the English Democrats Party, if they would paste that in there, I'd appreciate it. And I will try and copy and paste it and pin it as the top comment. Robin Horsley says, too much noise and repetition of previous points now. Time to go if this carries on. Royal assent is given by a minister, so they say. Says Stavros. Joe blogs, why was the Queen not wearing the crown when swearing the new government in? Any relevance there, Robin?
No, it doesn't have any legal consequence. I think the answer to that was that she was anxious to get off to go to the races.
That's right. She wanted to go to Ascot. Barbara Sherratt, she wore an EU hat when she last opened Parliament. She did wear a bit of a dodgy hat. Rick Bond, EC, the European Communities Act 1972, should have been ditched on day one. Stavros, legal is not lawful. It's all plain to see now. The gig is up. Rick Bond, our treaty obligations are based on deception and fraud. Well, you're being quite gentlemanly about that point, Robin, but he does have a point, though. Lisbon, for example, the Prime Minister didn't even sign it, did he? I know that, strictly speaking, isn't the case.
The Lisbon Treaty, we went through a ratification process, and there is an act ratifying it. So one of the arguments that I would deploy if we wind up in court on this is that actually Article 50 is part of our domestic law because of the ratification treaty. And in fairness, I think that argument would be difficult for the government to argue against. And of course, it goes back to the Gina Miller case where, in fact, the same point was made.
We've got somebody on the line. What would you like to say, sir or madam?
Dave Simpson is Ollie. How you doing?
Dave. Hey, Dave. Good. Actually, just quickly, you have got some news as an aside to the main theme tonight. You've got some news about the Go Slow protests with the lorry drivers, I think M5 way. Is that correct?
What we've done, Ollie, is we've gone onto the motorway bridges and we've put a Union Jack up, Welsh flag, out, a sign saying out means out. Let me tell you, Ollie, there's a video of the motorway on my timeline, and the horns are continually blowing. It's not 52% of the public that wants to leave. It's 80% of the public that wants to leave. When you look at all those cars on the motorway, all tooting their horns, giving us the thumbs up off the bridge, absolutely fantastic. If everybody went onto the motorway bridges and the walk over bridges, when it actually comes to the time to stop the traffic and shut everything down, everybody will already be in place. But you've got to let the public know that there is people out there willing to go out and stand up for everybody, you know.
Yeah, thank you. I tell you, it's good to hear it. It is very, very good to hear it. Anything else? Anything you'd like to ask Robin?
No, I'm good. I'll let you go, but I just thought I'd give you an update on that. Went very well today. We're out again on junction 25 of the M4 tomorrow. I do believe Bristol and Bath are doing the same, and we're going to try and get a few more junctions covered. Very sad to see what's going on, but I can tell you one thing, Ollie. Next election, these politicians, they're fucked.
No. None of that. This is a family show. But look, I'm so pleased to hear that. I'll tell you, my screen is full of love hearts from what you're saying. It's so great. Would you please pop on again tomorrow and just give us a bit of an update? Because I would like to liaise with you a little bit about what's going to go on around the 29th and so forth. Now, the 29th is the one day when we cannot be stopping the traffic because we want people getting into London.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. No, it's not. We're not about stopping traffic. We're just about, giving the people the confidence to come out on the streets, which has got to be done now because we're not talking about democracy anymore. We're not talking about Brexit. I mean, we're talking about democracy now. And I think you'll find that 100% of the public don't want to live in a dictatorship, which we are living in now.
Damn right. Before you go, Robin, is there any legal advice you'd like to offer these guys to keep them protected?
Well, I saw a disturbing stream of a video on Facebook earlier today where the guys up in South Yorkshire had liaised with the South Yorkshire police about the fact that they wanted to do a protest on the motorway and go slow. And the net result was that the South Yorkshire police had waited for them elsewhere and then stopped them and were confiscating their cars.
Well, they've been to see me every day, Ollie. The conversation has lasted about 90 seconds. Mm-hmm. And I told them that I didn't need them.
You told them you didn't need them, and what, they were okay? They're okay with what you're doing.
Well, they haven't got a choice. I'm a member of the public, Ollie. They are public servants.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. Robin, what's your take on that? Is there any possible impropriety here, unfurling banners over motorway bridges?
Well, certainly, if the police did get involved, they could confiscate them. They could possibly
no, they can't
take action. But I think the point is that if the police did arrive, you'd want to sound cooperative. I would suggest.
Dave?
Yeah, no, we've been fine. I had a chat with the police. They come to sort us out on Saturday. Right. Came again on Sunday. Came again yesterday and today. And like I said, the conversation doesn't last very long because I tell them, can they move on? Because I'm going about my business as I've got every right to do.
Yes.
That sounds.
It sounds like you're being robust with them. And that's always a good thing.
Well, you've got to seem to be. You can't let them challenge us because we are public, and they are public servants. They are there to serve the public, and the general public has forgot this, Ollie. They are public servants. That's exactly what it says on the tin. If you ask them to swear their oath and allegiance, that is their oath, is to protect and serve the public. You are a member of the public. The conversation's over. It's 90 seconds. Anybody that has a conversation with the police for more than 90 seconds is just bumping their gums and wasting their time.
Well, I think it's wonderful. I think it's fantastic. Joe Bloggs is saying, put a sign near your motorway, honk if you want Brexit, and then record the horns. And if anybody does that, please give me a link to it. I'd love to play that on the show.
Ollie, if you go onto my timeline, on my Facebook timeline, you will see there is videos of the traffic going boo, 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 boo. It's non-stop.
That's fantastic.
I had a lady from Bristol come to see me today, a lady from Bath. I had another guy come. We've had loads of visitors. Gerard Batten I spoke to on Saturday, who said it's a wonderful idea.
Mm-hmm.
He sent an AM to stand with me on the bridge because he wanted to get UKIP involved.
What, a Welsh Assembly member?
Yeah, David Rowlands came. He's a Welsh Assembly member. He came and spent an hour with me on the bridge and said it was a fantastic idea. He was overwhelmed with the traffic going by, blowing their horn. And it's not just the people on the motorway that are blowing their horn. People that are driving past us on the island, they're blowing their horn as well. Bus drivers, the lorry drivers have been fantastic. The coach drivers, all the service vehicles, council vehicles.
Wow.
Unbelievable. The footage is absolutely unbelievable. It's real. It's live. It's on my Facebook. The public support out there is no longer 52% because we're not talking about Brexit now. We're talking about democracy.
That's right.
And democracy is a very, very different thing to being in or out of the European Union. And the members of Parliament now and these politicians have really bitten off more than they can chew.
Go on, mate. God bless you. Dave, please call in again tomorrow and give us a bit of an update again, because I just think what you're doing is it's just absolutely wonderful. Love your spirit, man. Love it. God bless you. Stay safe.
Stay safe, guys. See you all soon.
Thank you. Now, okay, Robin, what about the funding for this then? How are you doing with the funding? Because it's not cheap. You need presumably a barrister and his team, and presumably he needs to be pretty damn good. It is not going to be cheap.
You're absolutely right, Ollie. It's not going to be cheap. Obviously, I've already done quite a bit of the work for preparing, and I'm continuing to do that. I'm going to try and get so that we're ready to issue as shortly as possible after the date. And I think that's important to do that, because the court's going to be saying that we've got to issue without delay. At the moment, we've raised about £16,000, which is pretty good. But I think if this was an ordinary judicial review, I'd be feeling that was probably enough to get us through the first few weeks. Mm-hmm. But the thing is that this is going to be a judicial review that's rather similar to the Gina Miller one. In other words, it's going to be very, very important and constitutionally significant. And I think the result is that the High Court will probably try and rush the hearing through as quickly as possible, so that there is actually a decision on this quite quickly. And what that means is we're probably going to wind up with the two hearings you get in a judicial review being dealt with at the same time, just as happened in the Gina Miller case. You get a permission to issue, and then you get the next stage, which is the actual hearing of the judicial review. I expect that within a few weeks of issue, we would get both of those. And if you think back to the Gina Miller case, just to show how that was rushed through the system, an ordinary court case, if it actually went up to the Supreme Court, would take probably at least 5 years to get there. In the case of the Gina Miller case, we had the referendum result in late June, and then by the turn of the year, she had the full hearing in the High Court. She then had the hearing and the judgment in the Court of Appeal, and she also had the actual hearing before the Supreme Court, although the judgment itself came out in the new year.
You're not backed by...
We actually need quite a big fund.
Yeah,
to
I was going to say, you're not backed by the likes of George Soros, are you?
No, we're not. In fact, George Soros is backing the other team, isn't he?
I think he is. And I tell you, it makes you wonder, doesn't it, how we allow that to happen as a country?
Yes.
So,
of course, if he was Russian, they'd be making a tremendous fuss about it.
Yeah, absolutely. They would. Yeah. Incredible news yesterday about off the back of Mueller, but that's another story. So how much do you need and how much have you raised?
Well, as I say, we raised about 16,000 at the moment, and that's largely through donations through the English Democrats website. I think those initial stages we really need about 25,000. If we had more than that, we could then splash out and get a more expensive barrister, and that would be good if we could manage it. But I think we could probably do a competent job with about a budget of about 25,000. If we get more, as I say, we will spend that on getting the best barristers. And I mean, for instance, one of the barristers I've been thinking about is Martin Howe, who's obviously the QC, who's been very high profile in backing the lawyer, being the lead face of the lawyers for Brexit. And he's already thinking about this sort of area and commenting on it. So he would be a big gun that I think would be good to get on board.
Why is he, for example, or that kind of character? I was going to ask how much support there is in the legal fraternity for this kind of an action. Why are we not hearing of other solicitors and barristers, people from your walk of life, getting involved and saying, "Hold on a sec, this is illegal"?
Well, certainly some of the people who've donated and who have made contact with me are other barristers and solicitors. So it isn't that I'm the only one who's interested in this. I think with any political issue, you're going to get some people who are on the other side, of course, and also most barristers and solicitors, like most ordinary people, of course, are getting on with their own lives and dealing with earning a crust rather than thinking about politics. Obviously, I'm not only a solicitor but also interested in politics with the English Democrats.
Yes.
So I'm perhaps more attuned to what's going on with politics than would be standard for a solicitor.
I have to say, well, actually, Robin, let's be honest. We had a bit of a tiff over the weekend, you and I. It was the politest tiff I've ever had with anybody, it has to be said. You are a gentleman, sir. But I was a bit concerned about some of the fundraising that's going on for this cause, because it's not going directly, some of this cash, to the cause, it seems to me. And I just wonder if this is something that might be a problem down the road for you. People should surely be donating straight to the English Democrats, for example, no?
Well, obviously, I would encourage them to do that because for a start, we've got systems in place, so we're getting the least cost from the banking system. It is going to the entity which is bringing this case. So that's what I would encourage, and indeed most of the money that has been raised has come directly to the English Democrats. We have had one or two people who are out there campaigning and raising the profile of the issue, and some of the money has gone by them. As far as I'm aware, all of it that has gone to them has then come to us. Having said that, there may be other people out there who are taking money. I'm afraid that's one of those things that you find when there's fundraising. Some people, it's just like with charities. Occasionally, there's a scandal, isn't there? It turns out that somebody's been collecting in the name of the charity and not handing over the money.
I'm not suggesting that that's happening. I'm not suggesting that that's happening, Robin. I'm just erring a little bit of caution because, from my point of view in this, as you might have noticed from my style, I know how the tabloids work, and I kind of do wonder if there could be a bit of an issue down the road. But where should people be donating to?
The other thing is that at the moment, most of the donations are very welcome and are, they're coming in smallish packages, and that's great. And obviously, our system is perfectly capable of handling that. I have had some contact with people suggesting that there might be people who would come up with very large sums of money to back this case. And then obviously if that happens, well, I am a solicitor, I have my own practice, I have client account, I can handle that in a way that's in totally compliant with the Solicitors Regulation Authority rules and with best practice. So it isn't a situation where we aren't able to cope with donations of any size.
Just a few comments before wrapping up tonight. We've got Warren Blameyer, Democracy. A lot of new names to me tonight. God bless you. Thanks for tuning in. You're always welcome. Warren Blameyer, democracy is dead. We should leave without a deal. Many countries want to trade with us. It's MPs who get large sums of money from the EU who are stopping it. Amin Ahmoud, who funds Drunk Steve. Lee Lewis, how can I, that's within the comments there. Why not have a word with Tim Martin, JCB, Jim Dyson? Well, I thought JCB was an Israeli company actually, but no, I'm thinking of the other one.
Anthony Bamford.
Anthony Bamford, right. Well, I mean, what about these characters? They are prominent yes. Brexiteers.
Yes, and
maybe
it may well be that
maybe,
and obviously that the kinds of money that might well be forthcoming if we are in this battle. That we're going to if we're going to go all the way up to the Supreme Court or the Court of Appeal, then it's going to cost quite a lot of money, and of course we might then wind up with a whole load of Remainer interveners who are basically trying to cause as much trouble with the case as possible. So basically any money that comes in will be used to make sure that we do win this.
Mandy Garland also says put a call out to Weatherspoon's man Tim Martin. Absolutely. Selden McGarry, you need the minerals. And set of balls. Sarah Boland, disgusting that Soros is allowed to interfere in our politics. And Marcus A. Cosmond says the politicians have taken away our democracy by lies and deceit. There is no democracy in the UK now.
Well, I think that there's a conflict of democracies, as I was trying to explain earlier. I think that...
Oh, pardon me. Hold on. Whoa. Oh dear! I'll tell you, my timing. I don't know what's going on. It was. Carry on, please. Go on.
I think there's a conflict, isn't there? There's popular democracy, which I think we're all gunning for, whereas the Remainers and the sort of backstabbers that we've got going on, backstabbing that we've got going on in Parliament at the moment, that these people are the so-called liberal Democrat type of approach, where they talk a lot about democracy, but actually when it comes to it, they're basically trying to block the majority getting their way. We've got a fight on our hands. There's no use saying that it's dead. We've got to fight for it, and we've got to fight for our own vision of what our democracy should be. I thought one of the sayings that I've heard recently that's worth thinking about is people often quote the famous German military philosopher von Clausewitz, who said that war is politics carried on by other means. And the quote that I heard was that you should turn that round, and that politics is war carried on by other means.
Robin Tilbrook, thank you very much. Good evening, sir. I want to say a big thank you to everybody in the comments. Yeah, and I mean we've had, I don't know, I'm not sure, but probably at least a couple of thousand comments there, and I always feel really guilty because I've only read about 20. very, very difficult to get around all of that. Actually, we've got. I think we've got a bit of good cheer here from Dave Simpson's page. Let's see if we can hear. Hark at this, people.
What's going on here, guys? Judging by the amount of people blowing their horn here, guys, let me tell you, politicians, you haven't got a clue. The public feeling here is a good 70-80%. Let me tell you, guys, when it comes to the next election, all you politicians, you're fucked.
Oi! Enough of that, Simpson. He'll be on tomorrow again. Robin Horsley too. Thank you so much, Robin Tilbrook. God bless you. You've been checking out the Daily Brexit. I'm Olly Connelly. I'll see you tomorrow at 7. Here's to us and bugger plutocracy.